So let's talk about cellular respiration. In this video, I will introduce what the process is and I'll give you an overview. So this is the general equation for cellular respiration. So we have here a glucose molecule. This glucose molecule is combusting slowly in the cells with oxygen to produce 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of carbon dioxide and the most sought after molecule in the biological systems, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Now, this reaction is what we call a redox reaction because in a redox reaction we have a reduction and an oxidation. So here glucose is being oxidized to carbon dioxide at the same time that oxygen gas is being reduced to water. Okay, so what is reduction? What does that mean? So a reduction reaction is when a molecule gains electrons. So gain, electron, reduction. Okay? Alors, French again. Reduction, you gain electrons, and oxidation, you lose electrons. Lose electron oxidation. So Leo the lion goes grr. Leo, grr. Lose electron oxidation, gain electron, it's a reduction. Alright, so this is a redox reaction in which the glucose is being oxidized and the oxygen is being reduced. Now, this is a simplistic image of glucose, and glucose has a bunch of bonds. Bonds, as you know in chemistry, they have bond energy. Okay, this is the energy that we are using to transfer from bond energy to ATP energy. So bond energy in glucose to bond energy in ATP. Okay, so as you know from the first law of thermodynamics, energy is never created or destroyed, but it is changing in form. So here we are changing from chemical energy to another type of chemical energy. But here, when the energy is bound in the bonds of glucose, it's useless. But when it is bound in the bonds of ATP, is very, very useful. And this is the cell's energy currency. We want to make ATP. That's why we eat. That's why we eat sugar, to make ATP, to run all the cellular processes. So this bond energy, by cellular respiration, is converted to ATP. If you take glucose and you burn it, let's take a little bit of sugar and light it on fire. It will burn and it will produce energy. But now this chemical energy, the bond energy, is being converted to heat, thermal energy, and heat, thermal energy is just lost to outer space and we never use it. Okay, so it's kind of useless. So in this reaction, we want to take the energy of glucose and convert it to ATP. It is a redox reaction. Now let's take a look at where this takes place in the cell. Here's a simplistic image of the cell. This is the cytoplasm compartment, this is the nucleus, and here we have the mitochondria. Mitochondria is the location where cellular respiration takes place. Let's review a little bit about the mitochondria, just so we can refer back to this image later. So here we have the mitochondria. It has two membranes, the outer membrane, outer mitochondrial membrane, OMM. This is the inner membrane, the inner mitochondrial membrane, IMM. And between the two membranes, we have the intermembrane space, and the inside, right here, is called the Mitochondrial Matrix. So this is important. I'll refer back to this image in a later video. Now, let's take a look at the overview of cell respiration. Now, the glucose molecule that we eat, and let's say you eat ice cream, you have a bunch of glucose in your blood, okay? The cells pick up the glucose, and now we have glucose in the cell. The glucose goes through a process called glycolysis, and this process takes the molecule of glucose and breaks it to two pyruvates. This takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. So glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell, not the mitochondria, so just in the cytoplasm. Now, glucose has 6 carbons, and each of the pyruvates have 3 carbons, so we have not really lost any carbons in this process. We just broke down the glucose to 2 pyruvates. In this process, there is a production of 2 net ATPs, and here we have this curious molecule being produced. We have 2 NAD pluses that are being converted to 2 NADHs. We'll talk about what that means later. Now, the two pyruvates are transported into the mitochondrial matrix, so into the matrix. And in this reaction or series of reactions, another two NADHs are made, one for each pyruvate, and two carbon dioxides, again, one for each pyruvate. So this is a decarboxylation reaction. We're losing a carbon dioxide from each pyruvate. So as you can see here, this makes acetyl-CoA, and each acetyl unit has two carbons. So we have a pyruvate. Pyruvate has 3 carbons. It went through the series of reactions, and now it lost the carbon dioxide, and it has now 2 carbons left. So acetyl-CoA goes into the Krebs cycle, also takes place in the matrix. And the Krebs cycle produces 2 ATPs and 4 carbon dioxides, again per glucose. Per glucose also 6 NADHs and 2 FADH2s. Now, all of these processes, or all of these molecules, the NADH is here, NADH there, and here, go into the electron transfer chain, ETC, and later on they produce ATP. Okay? I'm going to introduce a couple more terms before we carry on. The ATP that was made here and here in the Krebs cycle, this ATP right there, it is made by what they call a substrate level phosphorylation. I have really bad writing. But anyways, an enzyme basically plucks off a phosphate from a molecule and puts it onto an ADP to make an ATP. However, at the end, in the electron transfer chain, where the NADHs and FADH2s are cashed in to make ATP, we call this process oxidative phosphorylation. And we will talk later about what that means. Okay? So we make ATP through 2 processes, substrate level phosphorylation and oxidative phosphorylation. A couple more things. Let's talk about these curious molecules, NAD plus and FAD. Now, these molecules, NAD plus and FAD, are called electron carriers. Okay? Remember earlier we said that the glucose has electrons, okay? The bond energy is in the electrons, and basically what happens is that these molecules carry the electrons until later on, okay? So NAD plus picks up 2 electrons and a proton from the molecule with which it's reacting, and it becomes NADH. Now, since it gained electrons, it is now reduced. Remember, GER. So this is the reduced gain electron reduction, reduced form of this electron carrier, and that makes this one the oxidized form. Now, FAD is another electron carrier. It picks up 2 electrons, 2 protons, and it becomes FADH2. This is, again, the reduced form because it gains electrons. And this is the oxidized form. Okay? And one more thing. Let's talk about the ATP phosphorylation, so ATP formation quickly. Now, ATP is a high energy molecule. It is used everywhere in a cell to run all sorts of cellular processes. ATP, to draw simplistically, you have an adenosine molecule, adenosine, and 3 phosphates. It's called ATP for adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine I really don't like to write large words. Triphosphate has 3 phosphates, and this bond right here is a very high energy bond. Okay, it carries a lot of energy. When you break this bond, it releases so much energy that can be used in different cellular processes to run them. Okay, now when the ATP loses its phosphate, we call it Pi for inorganic phosphate, it becomes ADP. Let me draw that. So we're taking out a phosphate, okay? Now it's going to become ADP. Now this molecule is not very energetic. This bond right here, it does not provide a lot of energy. So this is a low energy molecule. It can be used sometimes when a cell is starving. And if it's used, you end up with, do you want to guess it? Adenosine diphosphate, so it will become, if you lose a phosphate, adenosine monophosphate, AMP, and AMP is a starvation signal. It tells your body that it is time to eat. Starvation signal. Now, so a general reaction that takes place sometimes, well, all the time in cellular respiration, ADP, adenosine diphosphate plus Pi, makes ATP. This is called the phosphorylation of ADP, the phosphorylation of ADP. You're putting a Pi, of inorganic phosphate, onto the ADP to make ATP. Okay? So I hope that this video helped, and stay tuned for a more detailed video about glycolysis. If you like this channel, please subscribe, tell your friends, and I can make videos about things that you're going through in school right now. Alright, bye.